All right, good afternoon and welcome. Thanks for sneaking out of the Vice CNO's luncheon to join us. They must have chopped liver on the menu or something, but regardless, thanks for being here. My name's Lila Linares, and I serve as the NSMV Senior Program Manager within the Maritime Administration's, or MARAD's, Office of Strategic Sealift. For today's discussion, I'll serve as the moderator, and we'll be covering a vital topic of the maritime industry: recapitalizing America's Sealift fleet. Joining me today are our distinguished panelists: Sara Fuentes, Vice President of Government Affairs at the Transportation Institute; Jeff Dixon, President of Tote Services; and Chris Moore, Senior Advisor to the Associate Administrator for Federal Sealift at MARAD. To ensure that the strategic mobility of the United States remains a strength unmatched by our adversaries, we must keep the spotlight on America's aging strategic sealift fleet. This includes the advancement of long overdue recapitalization, where strategies of buying used ships and new construction are currently being implemented. As you all probably know, MARAD's Ready Reserve fleet has an average age of more than 45 years old, and after a planned transfer of additional vessels from the Military Sealift Command is complete later this year, MARAD will be the nation's single sealift surge provider. On the new construction front, MARAD provides ships from the National Defense Reserve Fleet to the 6 state maritime academies for training our mariner workforce. And the replacement of 5 of these older ships is currently underway. We have 4 of the ships under construction. To build these ships, Congress mandated that a commercial shipbuilding contracting model that was consistent with the best interests of the federal government be used. MARAD developed and applied an innovative acquisition approach using a commercial vessel construction manager, or a VCM. Tote Services, or Tote, was competitively selected to serve as the VCM. Tote then held a commercial contract competition, and Philly Shipyard was selected for the shipbuilding effort. It is important to note that in addition to being an educational platform, these vessels are a highly functional national asset, as they'll be able to provide emergency federal response to national disasters such as Hurricanes Harvey and Ian. This is the National Security Multi-Mission Vessel, or NSMV program, which was developed to support the new construction of these purpose-built ships for the first time in history. It represents a much-needed investment to strengthen our nation's shipbuilding, repair, and manufacturing industries. For today's discussion, we'll have up to about 45 minutes to chat with our panelists on other topics of sealift recapitalization. And then we'll open the floor for Q&A from the audience. I'll now turn it over to our panelists for their self-introductions, please. Sara?
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm glad to see so many people so interested in Sealift. As Lila mentioned, I work for the Transportation Institute. We are a nonprofit that advocates for a strong U.S. flag fleet. Before that, I worked at the Navy League for almost 10 years. So I'm really committed to the idea of America as a maritime nation, and it's a pleasure to be back at Sea Air Space again. A lot of the work that I do is through coalitions. I'm also a part of the American Maritime Partnership, which represents the domestic Jones Act fleet, and a part of USA Maritime, which represents the international going U.S. flag fleet. I'm also a proud member of the DC Propeller Club board as well.
Thank you, Sara. Jeff?
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Congratulations on 2 counts. Number 1, everyone here made it through that registration line this morning. So you got that going for you. The day is only going to go up, starting right now, right? And number 2, you didn't get stuck in that stuffy lunch. It's like, if you stuck at a table, you couldn't get out of there. Here, if you want to get up, walk around, cheer when we talk, you can do that. This is a safe place, so welcome. Like Lila said, my name is Jeff Dixon. Wasn't that long ago, it seems like yesterday sometimes, that I was in the Coast Guard. So I had a 27-year career. I can tell you during that time, I never thought much about sealift. Okay, so those of you that find yourselves in that boat, Don't worry, this is a safe place. We're going to have a good discussion. I would tell you what I have learned in my time since I retired from the Coast Guard in 17 until today is that most people don't understand Sealift. Most people have no idea about how we recruit, train, and retain our highly qualified world-class mariners that crew our ships and are operating right now around the world. They have no idea. Most people have no idea what this thing called the Jones Act is. They just know it's bad. It's very divisive. But when you say, you want supply chain integrity, they're like, oh yeah, give me some of that. I want a lot of that. That's really what that's all about. So it's been an interesting journey for me. I've been surprised at how political that whole topic and this area can be. But I would tell you in no uncertain terms, I'm thrilled about being on this panel. It's critical to everyone in this room. And so I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. By the way, Lila's in trouble. She said there would be like 3 rows of chairs. It was going to be a very small room. No pressure here. Hopefully everything goes okay.
It'll be fine. Thanks, Jeff. And Chris?
Very interesting. When Jeff said that you can get up and walk around, it occurred to me that I consider the maritime industry sort of very much a family, and so I know that you can get up and walk around, but I really do have that sense that when we all work together, we operate like a family, and we don't always agree necessarily, but we do achieve good results when we do work together. So yes, I support the approach. As Lila said, I'm Chris Moore. I work for the Maritime Administration. I'm the Senior Advisor for Strategic Sealift. I work under Kevin DeKarski, the Associate Administrator for Strategic Sealift. I've been with MARAD for a long time in various roles. I was on active duty in the Marine Corps after graduating from Kings Point, and then I came back to the Maritime Administration, working at the Academy, and then later working at headquarters. And I have had the opportunity while I've been with MARAD to work with other departments extensively, and with the Hill and with the White House. So I have perspective on various government programs from various sides of the issue. And I agree that this is an extremely important topic. I'm glad that you're all here. I suspect that most of you are supporters of building Sealift and making sure that we have appropriate Sealift, not only for our national defense purposes, but also for economic benefits to the nation. And so hopefully our discussion today will help expand your understanding and appreciation for that, and will encourage you to go out and spread the good word to the rest of the nation who needs to know it.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Join me in a round of applause to welcome Sada, Jeff, and Chris. All right, so we do have a few previously submitted questions that our panelists are prepared to address. Afterward, we'll turn it over to the audience for a little bit of Q&A, and I encourage you to ask questions and ask the extra hard ones to Chris. Let's start with Sada. Sada, can you put the U.S. flag fleet in a global context?
Sure.
What are we competing against, and why does the size of the fleet matter?
Of course, Sealift is critically important. We need assured access to Sealift and to be able to move our goods. Our entire military strategy from World War I until today has been to fight over there, right? We do not want to fight any wars on America's shores. We want to take the fight to others. And in order to do that across 2 giant oceans, you kind of have this tyranny of distance. And so you really need to make sure that you have that logistics tail end. I'm sure everyone in this room is familiar with the General Pershing quote, infantry wins battles, logistics wins wars. And it's absolutely true. The history of our success militarily is all tied to our Sealift capacity and our ability to deliver American defense material, American soldiers, American airmen elsewhere. And so that's what we really need. And we've been able to comfortably enjoy American dominance in Sealift for decades. Just last week, I was at the American Merchant Marine Veterans Conference, and they wear these shirts that say, "You've needed us before, you'll need us again." And they are absolutely right. We have depended on them in every conflict, and we know that we will need them again. Our admirals in the next room, I'm sure, are talking about upcoming conflicts with China that are getting closer and closer. And so that's going to be another war that we fight away, where we need that capacity to move things. And right now, the U.S. flag fleet is in a tough spot. It's hard to be an American shipping company right now. You've got two major factors coming against you. You've got flags of convenience, which really dominate the shipping industry, which is exactly what it sounds like, right? It is floating sweatshops that do not have to comply with American laws, that don't have to pay living wages, that don't have to do the same kind of rigorous training that we expect of our mariners to have completed. They don't have to comply with EPA regulations. It's just tough. It's tough to compete against those folks. So you've got a race to the bottom in international shipping, thanks to these flags of convenience. And then also you have an adversary who is deliberately planning to dominate this space. Looking at the Chinese Communist Party, they are taking your typical corporate bully approach to shipping, where they are flooding the market, they're reducing prices, they're driving out all the competition, and pretty soon they will be the only game left in town. And if our next conflict is with China or involves China at all, then we're really in trouble if they are the only shipping capacity that's out there. You need assured access to American ships, American companies, American mariners in order to deliver that capacity. So it's critical that we have them there during war. And in order to get them there during war, we need them there during peacetime. We can talk about that a little bit more later, but that is kind of the scary, unfair playing field that our companies are operating in. So we know that we need them, but we need to make sure that we make the right choices and the right investments, that we are able to depend on them and really have that assured access to Sealift capacity that we have always had and have always depended on, and that has won wars for America.
No, Sad, I couldn't agree anymore. And we've talked about the potential for supply chain warfare as well, so denying access to foreign ports.
Right, that's also a huge part of it. China has a presence across ports globally. They're making loans, they're lending out labor, they're lending out material. They are being very, very generous, especially in some really strategic locations like Panama. They have some buildup near the Strait of Hormuz now. Like, they are really doing a lot. And as we saw during the supply chain crisis after the pandemic, China can really make us hurt without firing a single shot. So if we do lose our Sealift capacity, if we lose our American maritime industry, then we're totally at the mercy of someone who maybe does not have our best interest at heart, right? They could very easily put the squeeze on our entire economy by deciding they're not going to pick up American exports, and they really want to put pressure on us. Even some of those flags of convenience ships are probably owned in part by the Chinese Communist Party, by that government, by those state-owned enterprises. So we don't know that we can count on them either. So it's a really tough place out there. It's a tough market, and that's why we really have to invest and make sure that we have a healthy U.S. maritime industry for that Sealift capacity.
That's a good point. And like you said, I mean, you pointed out the challenges we had during COVID, and some of that was our fault, right? So there was congestion in the ports and on the West Coast specifically and things like that. But you bring up a good point about sort of the supply chain warfare. And if we were to go overseas and one of our adversaries just decides, such as China, hey, we're not letting you in.
Right,
What would we do
exactly.
then? So,
deny us access to ports
Exactly.
worldwide, that kind of thing. And so, during the COVID pandemic, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and Alaska actually all did very well because they were on Jones Act routes. So they had that. You can only have U.S. maritime capacity there, and so they had regular, reliable service during the pandemic that you didn't see elsewhere. So it's another good reason for keeping the Jones Act and some of these other policies in place to make sure that you have that American capability.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your thoughts on that. I'd like to turn it over to Jeff. We have a couple questions for you, Jeff. As part of a large domestic carrier, what questions or impressions do you see about the U.S. flag fleet?
Well, first, I'd like to give 5 extra minutes of my time to Sarah. I think she really hit the nail on the head. So, I think the first impression is folks don't understand what the U.S. maritime industry means. So, we talk about this thing, Jones Act, but people don't know that also includes airlines. They have no idea, right? It includes U.S. shipyards. People have an idea that that there are very few U.S. shipyards, and the ones that we have, they're very limited in capacity, which could not be farther from the truth. We have world-class shipyards that have capacity. We've got highly trained workers in those shipyards. And what people also don't understand is every dollar spent at home is a dollar well spent. You send those dollars overseas, it doesn't ripple through the U.S. economy. It doesn't build the opportunity for trades to develop. It doesn't support, if you use a shipyard example, it doesn't support the second, third, fourth tier subcontractors that work in that region that support that shipyard. People don't think in those terms. It was really interesting to me when I took, so I didn't talk too much about my background with Tote because I figured I'll weave it into my comments. But when I joined the company in 2017, I was the VP for our government and commercial fleet. And Hurricane Maria occurred, and I got an amazing lesson on politics that I did not expect. I got a phone call, and at this point, people were pushing for Jones Act waivers, really not to get anything to Puerto Rico, but to push Jones Act waivers and create a paper trail. And I got a call from somebody who wanted to ship water from Orlando, Florida, to San Juan, Puerto Rico. Don't fall out of your chairs. So I said, okay, well, what we would do is we would truck it to Jacksonville, Florida, and then we would ship it. This was like a Monday. We'll have it on the Wednesday ship going down. And they literally said, you mean your ship can't pick it up in Orlando? I'm going to call and I need a waiver so I can ship directly out of Orlando. I'm like, this is surreal. But that's the kind of stuff that goes on, right? It's just mind-boggling. There was a book, and General Broadmeadow, Augie, you probably remember, he talked about this a couple years ago. It's called Freedom's Forge. And if you wanted a good read, like right now, we're like, things are pretty crazy, right? You can't have a discussion about parking here for this event without it somehow getting political and somehow, and you're, right? Some people are smiling. Yeah, that's kind of the state of play with things right now. And we're having this Sealift discussion, which is heavily reliant on what is industry going to do to bring solutions forward. Mm-hmm. And whether that's the shipping side, the shipbuilding side, the labor side, all of those critical pieces have a part to play from a national security strategy standpoint. And if you were to read this book, you would think it was about today. Like it was, one of the parties was basically attacking any companies tied with the defense industry and had almost run some of them out of business. Unfortunately, when the phone started ringing, Franklin Roosevelt's getting the call, Poland fell, France is falling. Churchill's calling them saying, look, you got to get in now or you're going it alone. They were having these types of discussions, okay, very quickly. And like the year before we got into the war, those industrial leaders were talking about how they were going to surge the ability to support the nation's needs in what would become World War II. But everyone in this room probably has a default to kind of understand that discussion, right? If just one person could nod their head, it'd really help me out. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Augie. But most Americans don't. And so like Chris talked about, it's a big challenge. We order things, and like the Amazon van shows up, it's on the front door, and it just showed up, right? So, we talk about, so those are some of my observations. We have tremendous leaders in our maritime industry. Our mariners are world class. They're your next door neighbor. They're your sons, your daughters, fathers, mothers. They're proud of what they do. And they want to tell you that story. And when something happens, My experience from everyone I've ever met is that they'll be there. We need more of them. Okay? So I think, those are some of the takeaways I have as I look at this issue that I hear get conveniently categorized as we need to buy foreign ships. We need to do this, we need to do that. And by the way, I'm not attacking that position. I would tell you that we need to invest in our maritime capacity, and the situation is so dire, we're in an all-of-the-above approach. You got to buy foreign. You got to build. You really need to build. Why? We already talked about it. Because that is an investment in all those subcontractors, those capabilities that we're going to need. I hope we don't. But I would rather see us invest there. And then we need to modernize some of the ships we have. We've got some tremendous capacity, but they need service life extensions. We're in all of the above territory right now from a Sealift capacity.
Yeah, no, I agree, Jeff. And I think you mentioned that, the mariners and the necessity of them, and they're right, they're our neighbors, and they're, your uncle and your dad and things like that. And I think one piece that's missing, and I hope we can talk about it a little bit later, is how do we continue to promote the necessity for Sealift, right? And what, how mariners are recruited, retained, and that sort of thing. It's a great profession. And we just need to kind of talk about how do we get the word out there. Everyone knows that there's a mariner shortage. It's but I think the two concepts are definitely tied together.
It's also a slightly different nuance. So, for instance, for tote services, we utilize AMO, American Maritime Officers, for our licensed mariners, and then Seafarers International for our unlicensed. And we actually depend on them to recruit and train. They provide training capacity for those mariners to get their licenses and then keep current. And then those mariners are assigned to our ships on a rotational basis. So typically 9 weeks to 14-week time frame. I mean, it can vary by route and ship type. So it's a slightly different, and I pay into those plans, those pension plans, into their training, because I get something tangible from it. So it's a slightly different relationship in my mind than sometimes when you hear about unionization. And to me, it's a critical relationship that I rely on. It's just a slightly different nuance as well that people might not be aware of.
Yeah, no, I agree. Chris, we'd like to hear from you. Do you have anything to add on that? Otherwise, we have a few questions for you as well.
Well, I was thinking, I heard you say, Jeff, that you hope we never need it, but I was, the other piece of that is that I hope we need it and we use it a lot for not wartime, but for peacetime. Because we need to be at a point where we're building American ships in America with American labor so that we can transport American goods, and we rely on American manufacturing to supply the shipyards to build the ships. So I hope the federal efforts to build ships help encourage and provide a means for the commercial industry to follow suit in a big way.
In a big way. And I think we'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit about that. That's why I wanted to intro with the National Security Multi-Mission Vessel and the vessel construction manager approach, because that is innovative and it might be an opportunity to, kind of further along on that or piggyback if it makes sense. Chris, what's MARAD's role in ensuring that the nation has adequate Sealift capacity, and how does it go about doing so?
Well, the Maritime Administration's mission is to strengthen the maritime transportation system, the infrastructure and the labor and all the aspects of it. So all of our programs at the Maritime Administration help to create that base. When we talk about strategic Sealift, most people think of the ships, but it's more than just the ships. The MSP program helps provide the the entire logistics network that come with the vessels that are under MSP. And the
TSP as well.
right, TSP as well. We have Strategic Sealift program at MARAD has three pieces. There's a commercial aspect that where we rely on the U.S. commercial flag vessels, and we have programs that help support them and encourage that they remain U.S. flag. We have Federal Sealift, which is the government-owned vessels that are being operated by commercial mariners, and which is MARAD's essential business process. Whenever possible, we rely on the commercial industry to provide the capability, and that's the approach that the Maritime Administration uses, and it helps to strengthen the industry, and it helps MARAD to be able to accomplish its requirements with minimal staff and minimal funding. And then the third piece of the Strategic Sealift portion of MARAD is mariner training. Obviously, the Merchant Marine Academy is the largest piece of MARAD for maritime training, but within the Strategic Sealift office, there are programs that support the state maritime academies, as well as the unlicensed programs and support for labor and labor's significant contribution to making sure the mariners are trained and certified. And then we also have business practices within MARAD that work with the shipyards that provide financial means, programs for helping to finance ship construction. And we have on the port side, we have an office that deals with ports and inland waterways. And so all of those things work together to create the capability of having Sealift that the nation needs, and that is there when it's needed for commercial purposes, but also when it's there for the national security needs.
Thanks for explaining that. I think it is important, like you said, to make sure that everybody understands the commercial maritime is separate and distinct, kind of all have to work together. There's a couple pieces in there, and you mentioned the MSP and the TSP that's coming down the pike with the incentivization there, but we maintaining that organic Sealift capability is really important, obviously, to support Transcom. So thank you for that. Sada, back to you. Since Sealift is so dependent on private companies and civilian mariners, how do we incentivize them to continue to invest in the U.S. flag fleet? And you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but can you expand on that, please?
Yeah, of course. The biggest piece is that cargo is king, right? That is number one. Like, if we want to have mariners working and want to have those ships sailing, you need them working during peacetime, right? Like that flag right there, the U.S. flag Merchant Marine, in peace and in war. You need them there all the time. So it's not just about making sure you have this capacity when the balloon goes up, but having that capacity all the time and having that economic security and independence. And like Chris said, so investing in the MSP is a huge part of it. The Maritime Security Program is basically the best deal you can get in Washington, and I know a place where you can get dollar beers, so that is saying something. Not only do you get these 60 militarily useful vessels, but you get the entire infrastructure network that Chris mentioned. So it is, trains, it is relationships, it is mariners, it's everything. And it's also, these ships are also being recapitalized constantly by industry. Government is not paying for these ships to get refurbished and to get up to date and to get a new paint job. That is industry paying for it. The last estimate of what it would cost to replicate that MSP capacity is something like $8 to $9 billion, and we just get it for a couple $100 million. And as you heard, the unions do the training, the vessel operators procure the ships and do those upgrades, and you get access to that whole network. So continuing to invest in the MSP, making sure that those funds are appropriated, and also constantly going back and making sure that we're funding them at the right level, because MSP is authorized in 20-year chunks. And also you have a lot of changes in terms of inflation, kind of ship availability, that you need to be constantly reassessing that and making sure that we're creating the right incentives for industry to continue to provide this great service. The other piece of it is, of course, cargo preference, right, which is access, which means that 100% of DoD cargoes, 50% of civilian cargoes go on U.S. flag ships. If I was king, I would make that 100% for everyone. I think everything, anytime that is government-compelled cargo, it should go U.S. flag. DoD is very happy with cargo preference, and the civilian agencies should follow suit. But DoD really understands why it's so important to have that pool of mariners that are trained, that are ready. And so we would need cooperation from USAID and from other civilian agencies to really commit to using U.S. flag. It's a small investment, and it makes a huge difference for our national defense capability. The other piece is the Jones Act as well. So I think as long as you have the Jones Act protected and strong, you have another good pool of mariners. You have some mariners that are always working. As I mentioned, during the COVID crisis, it made sure that we had uninterrupted service to the non-contiguous states. And I think also continuing to appropriate the TSP, I think that should be announced pretty soon, by making sure that's built up. And Transcom will tell you that they're ready for, TSP 2.0. They think that they need, something among the orders of 100 tankers to really fulfill the distributed lethality operations that the Marine Corps wants to do, and more. So making sure that those programs are reliable, that they're well funded, that we're not fighting for dollars every year is critical. What the industry needs, as I mentioned earlier, it's a tough market out there. You're fighting against these floating sweatshops. You're fighting against incredible amounts of government subsidies, whether it's for shipbuilding or for the merchant fleet itself. We're in an uneven playing field. And so making sure that those programs, that three-legged stool that we talk about, of Jones Act, cargo preference, and the Maritime Security Program, are stable, they're predictable, that they're well-funded, and that we don't have to worry about threats. That would be the biggest thing that Congress and the government could do to really reinforce that industry participation, is to keep those three programs stable, funded, and protected, and keep them going.
Yeah, and I think you did a nice job explaining the policies that are associated with, but I think the big takeaway is thinking about Sealift holistically, right? So there's all these sort of pieces that fit together, whether it's buying used ships, new builds, and it's obviously looking for I don't know where we're going to find the 100 tankers for TSP, but we'll figure it out, and that sort of thing. So,
well, and that's something where like DLA could be, instead of buying oil, somewhere foreign, they could buy it domestically and export that on U.S. ships, and make that American cargo, and really create that kind of constant cargo. Any incentives we could give to shippers as well to incentivize them to continue to use U.S. flag. But basically, like, having that peacetime work is what's critical to making sure they're there later. So that consistency is key, cargo is king, and keeping all that going is what we really need.
Thank you, Saad. I appreciate that. Jeff, as a vessel owner, what factors do you think drive investment decisions?
Can I give Sarah 5 more minutes of my time? I mean, it's not even fair I have to go after her.
Everyone says that, I think.
I know. So, we'll set aside how tight financing is right now. I mean, rates are just really high, so we'll just put that aside in the discussion. But expecting industry to step into things that don't have a business case that makes long-term sense is obviously problematic. So, for instance, Tote Services, I fall under Tote Group. Our CEO is Tim Nolan. So when I'm looking at business opportunities, I've got to make the business case to him that this is viable from a long-term perspective. It has associated contracts with it, and that will justify the funding, the financing we're seeking, normally externally, although sometimes Title 11. So we really have to make those things work for there to be an investment. And these are expensive assets. I mean, when you're looking at new ships, you're talking in the $300+ million range. That's kind of a big deal that'll keep you up at night. So we talked a little bit about Jones Act. Jones Act, the market, it's pretty stable from a capacity standpoint. There's really not the ability to surge up capacity there. So then sometimes in this discussion, I go to a Sealift standpoint, surge Sealift. So I appreciate the reminder on that, Chris. But it's the same calculus for the U.S. flag fleet that the non-Jones Act, they've got to be able to operate in that international space. So that's why you see these programs like Sarah's talking about, MSP, TSP, Tanker Security Program on the tanker side, to help make up some of the difference, typically in personnel costs, crewing costs, to make our U.S. flag peers more competitive, but also, like Sarah talked about, give the U.S. government that ability to tie into those international logistics networks that otherwise they wouldn't have available. So, I think I would summarize it. The business case has to make sense. Now, one of the things we've alluded to a few times, and I think you said, Lila, we'll talk about it, the NSMV, National Security Multi-Mission Vessel. So I just told you that there's a business case that has to make sense, but I tend to be mission-oriented. It's how I was raised. So that one was a historic undertaking. It's a once-in-a-lifetime investment into supporting the future of the U.S. maritime industry. So for that one, there was a historic focus to support MARAD and the industry, and we led with that. So most days that won't get you by in this discussion, but for that one, it was so incredibly important that happened. That's how we led on that. But by the way, I already alluded to it, and I'll keep, when industry needs to step up, industry can step up. And everyone in this room should know that. Now they have some, they have financial realities they have to deal with. I don't think anybody in this room that's in uniform would like to PCS somewhere for 6 months, see how it works out, and then maybe we'll give you orders for the rest of the time in that location, right? It's kind of a similar thing on the industry side, right? You can't surge up for a short-term obligation to see how it plays out. There's got to be a longer-term benefit so that company can actually stay in business too.
Yeah, that makes sense, Jeff. And we'll talk, maybe we'll have a chance to talk a little bit later about what MARAD might be able to do to better support industry, and some, ideas of, different strategic planning and things that, we should think about going forward. Chris, go ahead. Sada,
It ties back, it just ties back to what you said earlier about needing a holistic approach. We need a national maritime strategy. We need to look at what, Coast Guard is doing for shipbuilding, what the Navy is doing for shipbuilding, and really think about all these pieces together. DHS, DOT, and DOD need to be talking to each other and developing a comprehensive maritime strategy that does do that holistic look, like you said.
Yeah, I agree. Chris, did you have anything to add on that?
No, I think that's well said.
Okay. I know she covers everything, doesn't she? I mean, why are we even up here?
We're just here for, we're just props. Sada's the show here. So. Chris, we'd like to hear from you on the fiscal year NDAA, so the 2023 one. In the fiscal year 2023 National Defense Authorization Act, or the NDAA, MARAD was directed to develop a design for recapitalizing the National Defense Reserve Fleet and to be prepared to contract with a Vessel Construction Manager, or a VCM, to begin construction in 2024. How is MARAD preparing to meet these requirements, and how do you envision this playing out?
Thank you for that great question. I was excited when I got to see the legislation and see that we were authorized to build 10 ships, even though it didn't come with any funding, because I've been in that position before, and it came to pass, and we have ships being built. So I know the importance of it, and I know how to do it, and I think there are things that MARAD can do without funding, that leveraging things that we've done for NSMV, studies that we had done previously, in-house work. We have a design capability, so we can do concept designs. We can do rough order magnitude cost estimates. There are things that we can do to lean into being prepared to begin construction if funded. And so those things we're going about doing smartly. There are things that we need to do to work with the department and to work with the interagency in order to prepare to make sure that we're doing the right things in anticipation of being funded to move quickly. And there is an urgent need to recapitalize. Like Jeff said, it's all of the above. We're buying ships. We need to be building ships. But at the end of the day, if funded for 10 ships, that'll help us strengthen the maritime commercial industrial base. It'll help expand the VCM role beyond tote. Tote's done an excellent job and demonstrated that the VCM approach works. And there are things that we've learned through the process where we can make it better when going forward with new construction. There are things that we learned through the design and construction process that are lessons learned for things that we need to be doing differently as a nation for manufacturing and for vessel development, that I think a 10-ship build of federal dollars would help create the means to do that. And so if at the end of the day we walk away with 10 ships, I think we have 10 ships, and that gets us closer to recapitalizing the NDRF or the NDRF. But what we need to be doing with that big of an investment in the nation is leveraging that to make sure that we have the right manufacturing and to make sure that we have the right shipyards and to make sure that we have the capacity for maintenance and repair yards, and coming up with a process for building the 10 ships that help strengthen the industrial base. Really, that's, I think, the most important outcome of a 10-ship build.
Yeah, I would agree. And you mentioned the advanced design and things like that MARAD could be doing. That helped reduce the risks, substantially with the NSMV approach, is having that advanced design, something that we could go out and bid to the shipyards. And so, it was with an ABS approval and concept, if you will. So if that's, something MARAD's going to work on in the interim, I think that would be very helpful. And then another point you made about, leveraging our commercial shipyards and seeing which one would be the right fit, or maybe multiple for a potential 10-ship build. You think about Fidley Shipyard, which really is a success story. Before we awarded the NSMV program, they had about 60 employees, and now they're up to over about 1,450.
Right.
So you can think about that, in that short time frame, just about 2 years, 3 years, you're able to go from you just, a couple folks sweeping the yard to the capacity they're at now. So that workforce development's huge.
Yeah, and they're getting more work, right? Like now they've got that Matson order as well. It's a huge, and we got a representative for Philly Shipyard right here who's very happy. It's an
a good
investment.
domino effect.
It's a real investment, and you see that payoff.
Exactly. So.
And when the administrator testified last week, one of the congressmen said that they expect ships to be delivered in 28. So if they're gonna fund us in 24, even then, that's a very tight timeline. We'll definitely be relying heavily on industry to make it happen. We'll obviously do our part, and we'll work with them to make sure that we're doing the right things. But the Hill has a very ambitious approach to this, and we'd love to support them if they. Absolutely. And so I said we'd circle back on what MARAD could do better to support industry, but I'll go ahead and give you the same question. Go ahead, Chris. I know that we have about 15 minutes left. I wondered if we're going to open up questions to the audience as well. But please, go ahead.
Yep, I'd like to maybe wrap up with 2 final questions, which might help frame some of the discussions with the audience. So for you, Chris, what can industry do better to meet the Sealift challenge? And then I'd like to turn it over to you, Jeff. What can MARAD do better to support industry?
Well, what can they do better? I would love to see us work together to create an industrial base that enables commercial companies to have a business case for building ships in America, and to have a business case for creating the cargo that's necessary for them to operate U.S. ships in U.S. waters and internationally. I would love for us to start to grow the industry, the U.S. flag fleet, above 100 ships, which I don't think is a pipe dream. I mean, following World War II, we had so many extra ships. We gave them to all the Allied nations that had lost all of their merchant ships. We understand the importance of a merchant ship for a nation's economy, and we need to be investing in a way that helps create a U.S. flag fleet so that we can grow the U.S. economy, and it'll pay for itself.
And I'd add, we're always looking for U.S. commercial vendors to build stuff that we need on the ships, right? So we'd like to buy America if we could, but some of the stuff just isn't made here.
And NSMV helped us identify some of those elements that aren't on the maker's list.
Yep.
Where previous companies had done manufacturing in maritime products that we would need for construction of vessels that they don't currently, because there isn't a business case. If they knew that we were planning for multiple ship build, it might provide them the necessary business case. If it doesn't, if there's still a gap, then it allows us, if industry tells us what those issues are, what those hurdles are, it can help us develop good policies that would create the base.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. And Jeff, do you have anything to add on how MARAD might be able to help industry?
So I think recruiting is a big space right now. It's great we're talking about building ships, but we need to grow the mariner workforce as well. So I think there's a role there. And then tailored communication to the maritime industry. I recall during COVID, we would have, MARAD would have biweekly calls, and there were like 120 people. And I mean, there were tug operators from the Mississippi, there were facilities, there were, I mean, it's just such a broad group. So being more targeted in our communications, I think, is an opportunity that we all depend on MARAD. One thing I would go back on the VCM, it occurs to me, I'm just kind of playing the game tape. I think we missed a step in the discussion of the vessel construction manager concept that MARAD created. And the idea was to leverage best commercial practices to get government shipbuilding work to yards that aren't used to exercising government contracts. It is different. So that has been wildly successful. It has a lot of attention. And then, I don't work for the government, so I can say it. We exercised, we'll be delivering hull 1 of 5, roughly 2 months behind the original scheduled date, which was April 8th. We're going to deliver beginning of June for a contract, and we're 0.3% above on cost. Oh, and by the way, when we signed this contract, that's right, keep trying, guys. And by the way, when we signed this contract with Philly Shipyard, no one even had heard the word COVID. So that's significant if you think about that. That's what industry can do, right? And by the way, supply chain disruptions weren't a thing either. So just a few kind of fill in the gap pieces we're talking about this. Just want to make sure we...
Thanks, Jeff. No, thanks for that clarification. It does put things in perspective. I know we only have, I promised you 15 minutes. I'll give you 9 minutes and 26 seconds for questions.
Sarah, first, I want you to let Admiral Pogo know that Jeff gave me permission to jump up and down and shout and shake.
All right.
I'm sure he's going to be happy with it.
Fine.
But I want to look at my wife. One of the reasons I'm sometimes cantankerous to MARAD is my wife is a mariner, and she was a thermostat dad. It's expensive. She runs the bill. And I'm like, look, I put in insulation. She's like, turn the thermostat down. I'm like, look at this study, how you get productivity if you have a higher temperature. She's like, turn the thermostat down. And she gets in on nest and turns it down, and I'm
So what was upsetting about that, by the way? That wasn't very upsetting. You said we were going to be upset with you.
That's just his wife.
Okay.
No,
We need visibility on this
yeah.
program, and I haven't seen an email or at the Pentagon briefing, I don't see any atmosphere like, we can build not only commercial ships, but warships using this. Why aren't we focusing on this topic? And why isn't it given national priority?
No, I agree. You're totally right. And you yourself have done a great job on bringing more attention to Sealift. And I'll also give the House Armed Services Committee a lot of credit for that as well. But I think you're absolutely right. You guys should be releasing a press release and pictures every day on that program. It's such a success. I would love to see more out of MARAD and get updates on the growth of the shipyard and what we're doing. I do think we're finally starting to get a bit of momentum on Sealift, thanks in part to the kind of supply chain crisis. But we still need more money. We need the Senate to kind of catch up to where the House is. At the end of the day, the Navy cares about their submarines, they care about their battleships. Sealift is always going to kind of come last. And so it's our job, it's your job as the publisher of a major maritime publication to really promote these ideas and get them attention. But yes, I would love it if you would send out daily updates on the NSMV. That would be great.
That'd make my job even busier than it is. But Chris, you were going to say, and I'll probably tack on.
I just want to comment a little bit. I appreciate the enthusiasm for the program. I agree it's very successful and there should be lots of fanfare. But I did want to know that although this is a successful program and it's important that we're doing it the way we're doing it for strengthening the commercial approach, I agree that it's good for commercial type Sealift. It could be good for other federal type Sealift, but combatant ships I think are unique in and unto themselves, and this is not an approach that I would recommend for that. I could be completely wrong. I don't build combatant ships, but
I would have said,
fair enough.
I agree. The commercial side, I'm happy to step up and we fill that role, and we've done that, I think, extremely well. I'm proud of my team and Tote Services. Navy has NAVSEA has their hands full, and I think they should keep the combatant side. That is a level of effort and 2 or 3 above what we're discussing. We can agree or disagree. That's okay.
These programs are mutually supportive.
Exactly. That's what I was.
We're increasing the maritime industrial base. We're increasing the manufacturing of the materials that are needed for both vessels, both types of vessels. And we also all compete for those same lay berths or dry docks that we have to go through for inspections and such. So it's important that we increase those capabilities as well, and that'll help the combatants and the non-combatants. At any rate, back to you.
Yeah, no, and I'd say I'd like to go back to something you mentioned, Sada, which is the thinking about Sealift holistically. So this is one approach, and we've talked about the success of it. But to your point, Jeff, how does the NAVSEA piece fit in? Where does leveraging MSP, TSP, that kind of thing, even buying used, is one of the strategies that's currently being implemented. So I think we just have to kind of look at all these tools that are available and see which one works the best. And it might be a blend of all of these tools, right? So, I think it's important, again, to just kind of keep that Sealift, as a holistic view very much in the forefront. So thank you for your question. I think it was a good one, and we need to keep thinking about it and how we're going to solve the problem. You had a question, sir?
Yes, I do. So I was wondering, you mentioned there were 10 ships, if I understood your comment. Are these general purpose ships? The reason I asked you is actually the Sealift program was built in It's also a transit for converted, and the H2 aviation was just a purchase. There was not
For this specific authorization, it specifically states 10 RoRo vessels. And they would be anticipated to replace existing square footage. But like I said, if you replace 10 ships, you have 10 ships, and we need more than that. And so with an investment of this size, I think it's critical that we do it in a way that creates the industrial base necessary for commercial construction and for additional RF recapitalization, because we need 50 ships, and 10's a good start.
Sir, do you have a question? Who'd like to take that? Who'd like to take on NASCO?
Wow. Well, I'm not exactly sure to answer that question. I do know that we built a U.S. flag cruise ship for the Hawaiian trades. I don't know where we built it. I'm being corrected from the... Fair enough. It was a cruise ship. So I have this idea that, this will be years from now, after we reestablish the maritime industrial base for commercial shipbuilding, that we're going to have a shipyard in Puerto Rico that's going to be building U.S. flag ships. And that should put to rest the whole idea of cabotage law issues. But it'll also give us additional capacity. And if they can be building cruise ships in Bahamas, I think we can be building cruise ships in Puerto Rico. That's my proposal. Happy to talk about it with anybody afterwards.
Thanks, Chris. We have maybe time for one more question, otherwise I think we're, oh, Chris, thank you.
That is a big question.
It is.
I'll say something that everyone in this room can do, which is sign up for American Maritime Voices. We have a grassroots network where we try and get folks to tell Congress about the importance of a maritime nation and the importance of the Jones Act and a U.S. flag fleet. I also think, MARAD is also described as a promotional agency. So I would love to see MARAD get more funding and be able to do more of that promotional work. But I think the people in this room have a lot of capacity for helping elevate that as well. Make friends with your congressperson and make sure they know The industry just had their big sail-in last Thursday, where members from the industry from across the nation went to Congress to tell them about the importance of having a strong, healthy U.S. flag fleet. But if you see our articles or if you see our posts on social media, please promote them, share them with others. It's mostly about us talking to our community. It's also been great, as I mentioned, how the House Armed Services Committee has really taken this issue under its wing, where you have Transcom and Admiral Phillips testifying together with the Readiness Subcommittee and the Sea Power Subcommittee, really focused on this issue. So I think kind of helping promote that, those nudges from Congress have been helpful in getting the services to understand. But yes, I would love for MARAD to get more funding and be able to do more promotional work.
Yeah, and I guess one thing we can probably talk about that is, the Maritime Centers of Excellence and kind of this grassroots effort of trying to build the mariner from, since high school or reaching out to the community colleges and things like that. There's obviously a tremendous amount of things that the state maritime academies could do, or the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy to promote those opportunities of becoming a mariner. But that is kind of a tough question. There's so much we can do. Jeff or Chris, do you have anything to add?
It ties back to the first question we got. Why are we, if everyone that was in the hearing knows that this is such a big issue, why are we still talking about it, trying to get funding for it? I agree that we definitely need to get better at messaging, not only the importance of the maritime industry and how it creates the ability to make money for the country, for the nation. Like manufacturing makes money, shipyards create jobs and make money. Having a U.S. flag fleet that is in international trade brings in money for the nation. And if we can get better at refining that message and sharing that message, I think that's what will probably get traction on the Hill, because we certainly need to be making money right now. And there is cost associated with, it's an expensive industry. Owning a boat is expensive, and building it and maintaining it and crewing it are all expensive. So, but they make money, and so and they provide a strategic capability, and so it's a worthy cause and an important investment. And I'm not exactly sure how we'll get the message out, but organizations like the Navy League and all of the other organizations that understand the importance, mostly from a strategic perspective, but also from a commercial perspective, help get the word out. I think that's where we'll probably lean towards first in getting the word out, but we certainly can do a better job of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly food for thought for all of us to spread the word. I think you mentioned it, Jeff. This is a very small community, and everyone probably knows at least one person in the room here. So spread the word, and I think we can all accomplish it together. So we are out of time, unfortunately. We've gone a bit over, and I'm getting the stink eye, I think, from Navy League in the back there. But thank you so much for being here with us today. I hope you enjoyed the discussion, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Great job.